Peace be upon you. There's a story about a man who donned the cloak of scholars, then headed to a village and proclaimed, "Ask me any question, and I'll give you the answer." Indeed, for every question asked, he had an answer and even provided details, which made people think that he was making up the answers. So they decided to make up a word, gobbledygook, and ask him about it. They said to him, "O great scholar, tell us about the gobbledygook." He said, "The gobbledygook is a plant that grows on the remote side of the mountains of Yemen. When camels eat it, their milk curdles. As the great Yemeni poet said, 'Your love causes my heart to knot, just as gobbledygook causes milk to clot.'" Who can prove this gobbledygookish scholar wrong? Who can reach the remote side of Yemen's mountains to prove that the gobbledygook does not exist? Who can say that this name, made up by the villagers, did not previously exist by chance? People always laugh when I tell this story, yet many people don't laugh when they read a similar story, Darwin's story, in his book, The Origin of Species, titled On the Imperfection of the Geological Record. Stay tuned. Darwin claimed that his theory necessitates a slow and gradual speciation, so the Earth should be filled with innumerable transitional forms. I use the word claimed because in the episode Who Stole the Million, we explained in detail that the phrase innumerable transitional forms can't begin to describe the astronomical number of trials that would result without any species transforming into another. For the sake of argument, let's assume that the discovery of innumerable transitional forms would validate Darwin's delusions. This means that transitional fossils should appear in the Earth's strata gradually, i.e., organisms cannot appear suddenly, because their sudden appearance means they didn't evolve from a prior form. Hence Darwin, in Chapter 10 of The Origin of Species, said, "If numerous species belonging to the same genera or families have really started into life at once, the fact would be fatal to the theory of evolution through natural selection." Note his words. Would be fatal to the theory of evolution through natural selection. Well, Darwin, even in your time it was known that numerous species did appear suddenly, starting with the Cambrian strata, and you knew that this phenomenon was observed in other strata, where numerous species appeared suddenly, unprecedented by your so-called transitional forms. Darwin admitted that this was a difficulty facing his myth, instead of admitting that this fact invalidated his theory altogether. He mentioned that some of his colleagues did challenge him with this fact. Did Darwin admit this out of objectivity and honesty as one may think, or to forge ahead with his usual gobbledygook? Let's see. Oh, big scholar Darwin, where is the gobbledygook? Where are the innumerable transitional forms that should precede the sudden appearance of organisms? Darwin answers, "From our ignorance of the geology of other countries beyond the confines of Europe and the United States," meaning the innumerable transitional forms filling the Earth's strata, per Darwin, might exist over there, on the mountaintops of Yemen, China, Mozambique, Honolulu, and Cuckoo Island. He says, "We continually forget how large the world is. What might have happened historically is that groups of species may elsewhere have long existed, elsewhere, somewhere, somehow, sometime, and have slowly multiplied before they invaded the ancient archipelago of Europe and the United States. Surely for this scenario to work, we must assume that these organisms, for some reason, did not continue their evolution in America and Europe, but evolved continuously outside these locations, and every now and then, an organism's clone moves to America and Europe and stops evolving, while its clone continues to evolve elsewhere. Hence, the strata somewhere outside America and Europe must be swarming with transitional forms. In light of this gooky scenario, you can understand Darwin's conclusion. Of this history, we possess the last volume alone relating to only 2 or 3 countries. Of this volume, only here and there a short chapter has been preserved, and of each page, only here and there a few lines. Okay, Darwin, even if we accept your explanation for the upper strata, how do you explain the very deep Cambrian strata, where many organisms suddenly appear, hence the term Cambrian explosion, without the innumerable transitional forms underneath? So, it's inconceivable that transitional forms preceded them elsewhere, as this is practically the Earth's deepest strata, with no significant strata beneath it. Darwin answers, consequently, if the theory be true, it is indisputable that before the lowest Cambrian stratum was deposited, long periods elapsed, as long as or probably far longer than the whole interval from the Cambrian age to the present day, and that during these vast periods the world swarmed with living creatures. But Darwin, is it reasonable that these long periods were swarming with living creatures? Yet, they left no significant trace? Can you prove me wrong? Did you dig deep until you reached the other end of Earth to prove that such layers don't exist? Honestly, no, I haven't. Well then, shut up. Darwin even has a third response. It is, however, probable that the world at a very early period was subjected to more rapid and violent changes in its physical conditions than those now occurring, and such changes would have tended to induce changes at a corresponding rate in the organisms which then existed, and thus the fossiliferous record could not keep up to retain the transitional forms. So, Darwin refers you to unknown geographies somewhere outside of America and Europe, to unknown depths of the Earth, and to unknown distant history, as if to say, I dare you to prove my theory wrong. So Darwin refers you to unknown geographies somewhere outside of America and Europe, to unknown depths of the Earth, and to unknown distant history, as if to say, I dare you to prove my theory wrong. People laughed at the Gobbledygook scholar who referred them to the remote side of the mountains of Yemen to find a fictitious plant, but they don't laugh at Darwin who refers them to unknown times and places to find the fictitious, innumerable transitional forms that the Earth's strata should be packed with and the surface of Earth should be overflowing with. No wonder, as Darwin's joke is preceded by the word theory. So, Darwin evaded the issue of the fossil record using 11,660 words in his book, The Origin of Species, which he concluded with, on this view, the difficulties above discussed are greatly diminished or even disappear. Disappear? Just like a magician makes things disappear with his wand. This is a good lesson for those who believe that Darwin was an objective scientist who acknowledged, in his book, the challenges facing his theory. There is a difference between a scientist who presents a coherent theory with a solid basis, then acknowledges its weak points and objectively discusses them, and one who presents myths, then dismisses objections by trivializing the contradicting facts and evading them. Darwin first treated organisms like Play-Doh. Then he referred us to unknown times and places through ludicrous scenarios. Then he concluded that his discussion resolved the issue completely, or almost completely. Note the gap in Darwin's gobbledygookness. It may be impossible to reach the depths of the Earth, and it is impossible to go back to distant history. But it is not impossible to search for transitional forms outside of America and Europe. So, Darwin's followers ventured forth looking for the organisms their teacher had talked about, looking for the gobbledygook, which would validate their great scientist's predictions. Their mission shouldn't be too difficult, as the Earth's strata, somewhere, must be swarming with Darwin's gobbledygook, which, for unknown reasons, is non-existent in America and Europe. While movie and cartoon heroes were looking everywhere for their mom, treasures, or the heroine, Darwin's followers spent the past 170 years searching for the gobbledygook everywhere. In China, they found nothing but fabricated bones, which they called the Archaeoraptor fossil. Alas, it turned out to be fake, as explained in the episode, The Pancake Theory. They reached the depths of Africa, Ethiopia, where they found bone remains which crumbled in their hands. Their hearts almost crumbled along with the bones, so they hastened to piece them together and present them as RD, which they considered to be the most important fossil discovery of the century and a significant icon of man's evolution. Unfortunately, their major journals such Nature and Science and major websites such as Scientific American threw doubts about RD's relationship to humans, and its interpretation is still in dispute. You can imagine the misery and disappointment of the myth disciples. They celebrate their crumbling remains, publish their discoveries, then disagree about them, while their theory requires countless transitional forms. Even if we concede that it is possible for one organism to evolve to another. Other miserable stories were mentioned in the episode for the sake of the myth. Despite all of this, Richard Dawkins insists, certainly there were evolutionary events, And we should have to dig elsewhere, in this case on the other side of the mountains. On the other side of the mountains. Remember the gobbledygook on the remote side of the mountains of Yemen? So, where is your gobbledygook, Darwin? We did not find it outside of Europe and America, in the astronomical numbers you promised us. This was a gap, not in Darwin's theory, but in its gobbledygookness. A gap his followers understood, so they sought to fill this gap. So when you hear that scientists after Darwin are filling gaps, it is true, but they are not filling gaps in the theory, but in its gobbledygookness. In other words, they are trying to spin stories about the theory's predictions to avoid a repetition of the embarrassment caused by Darwin regarding the fossils outside America and Europe. When you hear Francis Crick, then Richard Dawkins saying,
it could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto, perhaps this planet.
maybe aliens did seed life onto this Earth. They're no longer referring you to Yemen or outside America and Europe, but to the edge of the universe. Who knows? Maybe these space aliens who seeded life onto Earth are trillions of light years away in some remote corner of the universe. Can you prove otherwise? So don't be surprised if in the future Darwin's disciples tell us that evolution happened on planet X and the forms of life we know came to Earth on flying saucers, while the transitional forms remained on planet X in countless numbers. Then, this gobbledygookness enters the world of physics and astronomy to transfer the gobbledygook, not to the far mountains of Yemen or the edges of the universe, but to regions outside universe itself. In The Grand Design, Hawkins tells us the fine tunings in the laws of nature can be explained by the existence of multiple universes. But where are these universes, Hawking? Did you leave our universe to prove my theory is wrong? And that there aren't any infinite multiverses? But how do we scientifically prove it? In the future, perhaps, black holes may offer a route to other universes. A referral to future unknowns just like they referred to past unknowns, but this time, beyond the boundaries of the universe. This is the gobbledygookish method, referring to unknowns that cannot be verified, a method frequently used by myth disciples in many areas. So, be on the lookout for it as you debate them. Peace be upon you.